The Tennessee Department of Education is excited to work with you on this opportunity to discuss the state's formula for funding public education. Before we begin, the department would like to remind you of the following. Conversations on this topic are not intended to reflect on the current BEP funding formula. The current BEP funding formula will remain in place until a new funding formula is recommended to and approved by the Tennessee General Assembly. The public is encouraged to submit comments in writing to ensure that all communications are thoroughly documented and can be reviewed and considered in the future. Public comment is encouraged to focus on developing a new funding formula rather than revising the current funding formula. Consider what should be funded in a new funding formula and at what level. Subcommittees will be responsible for reviewing public comment and making recommendations for what should be included in a new funding formula. While all committees, subcommittees, and members of the public should feel free to communicate openly, documents and records may be subject to public inspection pursuant to the Tennessee Public Records Act and may be publicly posted or otherwise made available. All recommendations that are submitted by committees and subcommittees will be reviewed and considered, but not all recommendations will ultimately be included in the proposed new funding formula.
Thank you, Dominique. This is a brief look at our agenda for today. Dominique, let's go ahead and do our roll call and attendance, please.
Okay, I am seeing that we have Elisa, Gloria, Samantha, Cheryl, Jennifer Nichols, and Courtney Mott. Mary Graham. Is there anyone I have missed?
I think that is it. Great. Well, thank you. Welcome everyone. I hope that everyone's doing well. Dominic, you'll roll to the next slide, please. So one thing that I do want to make sure that we touch base on today, as I said in, I guess after our first meeting, had a conversation with the commissioner, and she really wants to emphasize, the community feedback from your respective communities. And as you all know, the commissioner and her team just wrapped up the final town hall over in Jackson County. I guess that was a week or two ago. So lots of great feedback there. One thing that the commissioner noted in our chair's meeting that we had with her yesterday, actually, was that with the different regional town halls happening, there's a lot of buzz, a lot of media buzz around the town halls and the BP and whatnot, which was great. But what also occurred was that buzz was kind of restricted to those areas. So there was some feedback from across the state to really open up the opportunities for everyone to engage. And so I know that many of you have been talking to people in your communities. I know that some of you have attended some of the town halls. We I think we received some of the feedback from the department yesterday, some of the public commentary. So I encourage you to, if you've not already, continue digging through that. For today, what I would like to do is kind of do a little bit of a share out and talk about some of the feedback that you've already gathered from your communities. And I'll actually start. Just a few weeks ago, I was over in Crockett County, and that's Representative Hurt's district, and sat down with the Crockett County superintendent and the Bell City and Alamo City directors of schools, and a couple of school board members, and really got some good feedback from them about what they would like to see. One of the common themes is that they really do want to see a student-based formula that is that is, really easy to understand and transparent. And, from a budgeting standpoint, as a director of schools, you look towards the future and how much money you have for staffing, for supplies, for classrooms, that kind of thing. So I saw a lot of parallels with conversations that we've already had in our committee, and then specifically for over in rural West Tennessee. They're right in the backyard of Blue Oval City, right? So there was a lot of conversation around career technical education, vocational training, what that would look like. Perhaps, should the new formula, consider a weight of, for high school students. And so those are a couple of things we talked about. I also had a conversation with the Jackson Chamber of Commerce as well, and there was a representative from the Jackson Madison County School Systems present as well, which was excited to chat with them. And it was similar. They're a growing district. They're looking at building a new school, and one thing that they were discussing was about mobile students. Students that move a lot, students that are homeless, students that cannot be accounted for sometimes, and from their standpoint, what grouping students in, be it 9 through 12 or maybe 7 through 12, so there's less moving around from one school to another as you matriculate, elementary, middle, high school, so on and so forth. But those are just a couple of things that that I've been doing. I think it's always valuable to talk to those who are in the work, right? To the superintendents, and obviously chambers of commerce across the state are engaged in education conversations. Is there anyone else who'd like to share some of the conversations they've had in their communities?
Yes, Victor, I would. Gloria Sweetlove, as you all know, we are doing focus groups across Northwest and Southwest Tennessee. And we did have a focus group meeting on last night at Haywood High School Library. And we had, of course, we talk about, you talked about meeting with Crockett, with the superintendent. We had a couple of school administrators there. The superintendent was at the last meeting. He's not able to be at this one. But we have made our group make sure that we got a number of stakeholders, everything from former superintendents to classroom teachers in elementary school and high school. We've invited a high school student. They had a game last night, so they weren't there. But we've got clergy people, we've got people in finance. And one of the things we had heard from them in some of the surveys is the fact that they knew nothing about school funding. So last night we had Ben Torres from TSBA virtually explain and go over and spend some time talking to the group about what the current BEP does and how it's set up and those kinds of things. So of course they had lots of ideas when you talk about, it's primarily based on taxes and stuff. And knowing that when you look at the Northwest and Southwest counties, that we've got low tax bases. So we had some great conversations. So we are capturing that information in surveys, and we are also making sure that we do record all of those sessions. So had a great session. We will be doing another session on Saturday and trying to get them all in. I'm actually trying to finish them up before we finish up so we can have a written report to submit. So had a great session, great involvement. We had people all the way from up at Henry County down to Fayette County to Dyersburg, so Tipton. So we had folks from all over there. Thank you.
That sounds great. That sounds great. Getting so many people from regionally, and then but also people across across the board who who are making these decisions and will be impacted. Anyone else like to share? Just feel free to hop in if you'd like to share.
Hey, this is Mary from United Way. I just put some stuff in the chat because it was too much to bark at y'all, but we've been at all of the meetings and town hall meetings, and before those came up with kind of 13 areas that we wanted to really get answers to. I think our biggest concern, was that this was going to be a way to sneak in vouchers, but it appears not to be. But in terms of this group, I think number 2, we were really concerned about what kind of weights would go for students with disabilities, et cetera. We've also had a lot of concerns about some of the match requirements for some of this as well. But you can kind of see where my folks, where their considerations of I'm with the United Ways Tennessee, with the United Ways have brought to those conversations. We were glad to hear no vouchers. I hope that's helpful. I just thought that was easier than barking it at you.
Yeah, no, thank you, Mary. Yeah, this is great, and yeah, I think the commissioners mentioned this a couple times, and the new formula will be for our public schools only. So I know that was a question that came up as well around some of the private school choice and vouchers and whatnot. Anyone else? I'll going back to looking at students post-secondary, looking at my notes here. One thing that the chamber mentioned, which I thought was interesting, waiting, a wait for talent, like a student who may want to who wants to go into the workforce, but they may want to do welding, or someone who wants to be in construction, and maybe looking at a wait for that. And one thing they mentioned is as they through COVID, they've kind of had to rethink how they engage students and what post-secondary options look like for a lot of kids. And so that was something that came up. Something else that I thought was interesting, there were a couple of legislators who were present. So Senator Ed Jackson, I think he serves on one of the other subcommittees, but he mentioned how students at the School for the Deaf, so there's a School for the Deaf here in Tennessee, and when they matriculate, there's a cutoff at a certain grade, and those services are not still available. So I think Mary, maybe it was you who just mentioned about the weights around our special needs students, and so that's definitely something that would I would say would be a must-have, right? In a new formula, a new student-based formula, something that considers those kinds of circumstances where you have a student who will need extra services, but there may not be the infrastructure traditionally for those services, but a new formula could probably do that. Anyone else? Feel free to hop in.
Just comments on what you just said. And that's some of the things that we are hearing from people, is that we really do need weights for special needs children, even gifted children, because if you think about it, most systems just have, just a limited amount of curriculum-based things for gifted children. But if a child is truly gifted, for them to ever reach their full potential and go on to do greater things after high school, we really have to have some consideration of that. And we have to, as well as having some consideration for those in the special needs group, like you define the deaf children.
Yeah, absolutely. Something else that I think this kind of came up some of the town halls was, and I think it was just mentioned on our call today around, tax base and a local tax base, and across the state, each community, right, each county has does not have the same tax base to put back into or to contribute the local contribution for for the BEP and school funding and whatnot. So that was something that was pointed out as a challenge as well. But that's something that people smarter than me will I guess have to look into. So.
I will add that there are conversations kicking off in all of the regions next week, in-person meetings with all the regions around local funding. So superintendents are being invited. They're inviting their funding bodies. And so that conversation is starting next week.
Victor, hi. This is Sherelle Campbell Street with the Department of Human Services. And again, I just would like to thank Commissioner Schwinn and the team at the Department of Education for inviting us to be a part of this very worthy discussion across the state. We are very appreciative to be able to speak, particularly on behalf of the citizens in Tennessee for which we serve. And I'm just wondering, maybe as another suggestion as part of the formula, here at DHS, we have a program, and some of you may are aware of it. It's called vocational rehabilitation. Since we're talking about students with disabilities at this part of the juncture, the meeting. In some of our school systems, the school systems have an MOU with the department, particularly VR, in which they fund part of a salary for a dedicated vocational rehabilitation counselor as part of their transition team. I think that it would be really good to look at those school systems by way of budgeting to see if that's something that could possibly that we could leverage across all 95 counties, because what the data suggests is that when you have a particular designated VR counselor for students with disabilities, they have over 90% success rate after graduation in the world of work. And so I just wanted to throw that out. I know we're talking about a funding, as far as this BEP program, but again, there are some school systems that are able to put up, and it's not a whole lot, but if there was some way that we can maybe weave that into it, to maybe have a dedicated counselor to provide those supports around employment, as well as if you are working with VR, transportation, rent, just about everything is allowable in terms of spending, even assistance with post-secondary education. So I'm sorry, just wanted to put that out there again, as well as put in a plug that I believe that as part of this funding formula, we do need to look at our shared data, the number of students that are in a household that are receiving supplemental nutrition and the food program, the SNAP program. I think that would be very good to kind of lay our data on top of your data to see, are we missing any opportunities?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you, Sherelle. That's some really good insight.
Can I ask, is that something that you can provide, or is that something that you're needing provided for the committee? Just a clarification.
Well, depending on and I would yield to your expertise, Dominique and Victor and all the other people on this call. I would just need to know what type of data you would be interested in. We have a lot of data, by way of the funding for the Department of Human Services. We're over 90% federally funded. And so, of course, dealing with the feds, as you guys are well aware, there's reports galore. So depending on what you would like, I can certainly provide it. And I believe that we may be even working together, definitely in the space of the pandemic PEBT program, where we're sharing data between the two departments. So depending on if this is something that the committee feels that could be a benefit, I certainly can provide data.
Thank you, Sherelle. Dominique, can we move to the next slide, please? Something else that has come up a lot at the subcommittees, and I think we discussed a little bit on here around like, some base costs. So as you see here, nurses, counselors, school psychologists. I think a lot of students even have, really advocated for a lot of those services. And I know that the legislature has at least proposed legislation around getting more nurses and counselors into our schools, for our children. And then of course, teacher salaries is often, at the top of the conversation when you're looking at school funding. Is there anything from this list that you think anyone thinks is missing? Anything that we should expand upon? So RTI specialists add in there, or do you think this list is perfect as is? Is there more that should be done in a new student-based formula for these types of roles? Have people in your communities talked about this at all to you?
Well, one of the things I've heard that's not there, and I don't know how which group it needs to be under, but people have talked about a parent liaison, because often, the average parent, a new parent, has probably not been to school since they left high school. And, it depends. Often they don't really know how to interface with the teacher, with their child's teacher or with the principal to really get things worked out or whatever. And especially when you're talking about, like we're talking about disadvantaged, low income or parent often have no inkling of how the school system works, how to really interface. So we've heard people talk about, I don't know if that's a teacher or what, but somebody being a parent liaison.
Yes, no, I've heard a little bit of that as well, and I think this is kind of a slight digression here, but I know that some school districts are using some of the ESSER dollars that have come in from the federal government to, do some of that as well for now. Unfortunately, with those dollars, they run out in 3 years. So, perhaps with a new student-based formula, particularly for the students that you just mentioned, Ms. Sweetlove, there's you can look at like flexibility, right, around how you serve those student needs and advocate for those students with those types of positions.
So this is Sam. It seems to me that I'm a little bit concerned that this list is basically a list of positions as opposed to a list of problems that we're trying to solve for, and then how we might fund towards those solutions. So like, counselors, I think people have a set of opinions about what it is a school counselor does. And I think that's wildly different in reality what a school counselor does. And so just funding more and more of that, I don't know if that's actually solving a problem that the state or that the community intends to solve, for instance.
I like what Sam just stated. It's kind of a fundamental question that we all need to maybe take a breath and think about what problem are we trying to solve, um, and have a clear definition to that answer. To your point, Sam, I do think that some of the things that we have been describing, depending on the school system or the person, that could be defined as a school counselors, and some school counselors do things differently. So it would be probably some benefit to all to just spend some time to kind of think about what do we foresee the end goal in mind in a little bit more detail, because positions alone, will not necessarily, or it may not get us to where we're trying to get. Like if we're saying the issue is supporting students with their mental health um, challenges while actively being in an academic setting, then that would be more of I would think of a licensed mental health counselor. And that takes on a different flavor than your school counselor. And then also, maybe sometimes should be spent on understanding the purpose of the family resource centers that are across the state. I don't think each school district has an active one, because maybe it's more of a hub or a menu of services based on the needs of the community.
No, all great points. And I believe that that's absolutely correct. And we look at, what the need of the student is. And so we start off with what those needs are. And then we funnel, if the, in one of those columns, if counselors and school psychologists fits in, great. But, starting out with what that need is should definitely be the approach. As we look towards the student-based formulas. I think we could put that down as a recommendation, Dominique, is, ensuring that we're looking at what the actual student need is and not just focusing solely on positions.
I also think if we look at some of the comments they sent us that actually were given at some of the town hall meetings, I think you will see some of the things, you hear people talking about we've got to have, more counselors and more school psychologists because we've got an influx of opioid babies. I think, when I think about school systems and school boards and superintendents, I think we don't want to be so restrictive, because what might work, what's needed maybe in Cook County might not be what's needed in Crockett. So I think, defining them. One of the things we don't want to happen, though, we know for a fact that a lot of times school counselors now are given busy work, a lot of things that nobody else has time to do, instead of really spending some time doing the counseling duties the way they need to. So we don't want to add counselors just, for an extra body to go do something else the principal needed done. I think we really need, if we say they're counselors, I think they really need to be geared toward making sure that they help those children with planning for college and for future post-secondary kinds of things. And if there's school psychologists needed, because we've got babies that actually have some problems where they need a psychologist, I think that needs to be defined by the system. So I really think, I think if we define we say we need some of those, but the system has to say in that particular locale, they have to be able to say, this is what I need. You know, I need 2 more psychologists, but just 1 more counselor.
Absolutely, and that's a great segue for the next slide, discussing weights. So, you know, we talked about, you know, a lot of this. I think, you know, that second bullet around students with disabilities, I mean, there's a lot you can break that down into, and looking at what those needs are. So, you know, maybe looking at what the disabilities are, and then, you know, ensuring that there's enough weight in there, enough money in those weights to ensure that those services are met. And I threw something in the chat, you know, some general principles, you know, in my opinion, I think would be just kind of good guiding stars for a new formula. You know, adaptability, you know, I think we've talked about this before, but no, today's students are not the same as students who, you know, from 1992, right? You know, fairness in a new funding formula, that's come up a lot, I think, in the town halls and meetings I've had with superintendents across the state. You know, maintain the flexibility, but also having some transparency. And, you know, the part about the parent engagement and having parents part of that process, that's very important to a lot of communities. And then, you know, a simple and predictable formula, right? Something that's not confusing, and something that you can see, you know, how much, you know, money is coming in, and you're able to, you know, map out your budgets for the year. You know, looking at those top 3 bullets, I think those are the, you know, probably the, you know, the top 3. I guess that's why the department put them here, around, you know, students who really are, you know, not currently getting, you know, weights that correlate with their actual need. And so, you know, are there any thoughts about, you know, these weights? Are there other weights that should be considered? You know, kind of looking at these, I mean, I think the top 3 are definitely some must-haves, but, you know, even looking at, you know, bullets 4 and 5, you know, rural and sparsity, and then I think with the growth across our state, with so many families moving here for jobs and whatnot, you know, something I didn't think about, but maybe fast growing. So any thoughts about these weights?
I have one question about, this is Mary, about the rural, which I think is very important. But a lot of my urban United Ways, you know, we're talking about higher cost of living, more expensive teachers, you know, pockets of extreme poverty, etc. And I wonder if in addition to rural, if there are pockets of urban that need some consideration. Just passing that out as a possibility.
That's a great question. You know, and you know, Dominique, maybe we add that in there. You know, rural, urban growth, consideration, a weight.
Victor, could you help me understand a little bit the difference between rural and sparsity? And then also, I'm not clear about how charter enrollment, how that figures as a weight, if you have any insight on that, or anyone in the group.
I'll do the best I can. So my understanding is rural is defined by however the federal government defines it. You know, your rural, urban, suburban, and off the top of my head, I'm not entirely sure specifically what that looks like. And then for the sparsity, and Dominique, you can correct me if I'm wrong, for the sparsity, it is a part of the population and how many students are attending a district, or how many people are in are being accounted for at a time within, you know, a community, a municipality, a city. But that's something maybe, Sam, we can follow up with the department on. I'm sure they have a white paper on these terms.
Yeah, the rural is defined, it is a national definition, and sometimes, you know, a county might be considered rural or not be considered rural because of their location to a city. And I think the example the commissioner gave the other day was Campbell County. If anybody's familiar with Campbell County, they don't fall into the rural category, but they are very, very much, not what you would consider a non-rural area. I think the sparsity has something to do with how that population is dispersed across the area. So I need a little bit, we probably need to get a little bit more clarification, but I think that's a little bit of the distinguishing mark in that. And with the charter enrollment here, this slide is just pulling together a summary of what feedback was received when they loaded the comments after the town halls. So, this is a really good opportunity for you to look at these things and you determine what resonates with the way, your committee is thinking, and then adding things just like you did a minute ago that might be missing, like the urban. So these lists are not in any way anything intended to be what are going to be considered in the weights. It's just what feedback has been gathered at this point. So, this is a really good jumping off point, and you may want to go to some of those resources that were provided in the links and in the folder this week and go look at what some other states are counting and using and having weights for, and, see if that resonates with the things that you're thinking of in this committee.
So Dominique, thanks for sending those. I did go through several of those yesterday, and they were really helpful for this conversation.
Good.
Go ahead, Miss Sweetlove. I see your hands raised.
Yes, I was just going to add to what Dominique was saying. I think sparsity also talks about level of services, because you might not be rural, but you might your internet and might not be any better than mine is in a rural area. So I think it also talks about services.
Great, thank you. Dominique, can you go to the next slide, please? All right, so so some other feedback from across the state looked at funding for financial literacy, middle school career technical education. So looking at and identifying what interests of students are in middle school and what they might want to do post-secondary to provide those options. Innovative high school models, extending the school year. I would say that's definitely a byproduct of COVID there. RTI, response to intervention, and then high dosage tutoring. So one note there that the department currently has a program that includes some high dosage tutoring, but those are with federal dollars. So from what I've heard at some of the town halls, looking at how districts can continue that, and you can have their own district specific, community specific type of tutoring program. Is there anything else additional dollars wise that we did not cover as far as what weights and whatnot? Anyone would like to see?
So just this is Sam again, sorry. So just playing out the rural and urban, I would almost want to see rural pushed over into maybe additional dollars, or I'm not sure how this will all look, but in our rural work, what we find is that there are just so few other social services, period, that exist. And so I totally get the sparsity on that level. And it feels like that would be the reason, or maybe one way that you would push additional dollars into rural or more sparse communities. because those kids still need a lot of wraparound support help, and being able to get access to those is pretty hard without the funding.
Great. Thank you, Sam. Oh, Ms. Friedlove, see your hand up.
Sorry, I didn't take it down. I'm sorry.
That's all right. Next slide, Dominique. Thank you. And this slide is looking at what outcomes could look like, your EPSOs, your early post-secondary opportunities, AP course completion, reading proficiency, those kinds of things. Next slide, Dominique.
Hey, it's Mary Graham. I know we're spending, I guess it's more on the back side about additional funds, but we have some United Ways that are actually giving incentives to school to bring in more teachers of color in places that are lacking them. I know there are pieces in there about, funding teachers, but I wonder if we can push for some extra funding or a little more emphasis on making sure we have, good role models and equity in our teaching positions. I don't know where that would fit, but I just want to toss that out there. That's important to us.
Great. Thank you, Mary. All some great feedback today. Really appreciate y'all weighing in. So, we've talked about this a little bit before, but hey, Dominique, did we mark down any of the must-haves or should-haves or nice-to-haves already from our previous meetings?
We haven't.
Okay.
A couple of times somebody may have said they think it should be a must-have or a should-have, and I may have flagged that, but we have not. We could do that, or a group yesterday asked me to put together a chart in that shared link that I put in and I can put it in the email too, to allow people to start in the group to start making some decisions around that. So I could do something similar. I could share that with you, Victor, when I share the recommendations document, and if that's something you would want.
Yes, please do. Thank you.
And then that way the whole group can have it. I can send it. You all can start putting some notes or putting some things where you want them to be.
Yeah, that makes sense, and that way everyone can throw in what their ideas are, and I know that everyone's continuing to talk to everyone in their communities, and so we will do that. One thing that the commissioner mentioned, there's some resources that were sent over to our committee, and so around ECS, I forget what the acronym stands for.
I forgot too. I can go look.
Elisa, do you know what that ECS stands for? I forget it. And then, the commissioner also mentioned how the department will offer up some national experts in this field. I know that we had Aaron on a couple meetings ago, or at the last meeting, and so Education Commission of the States, ECS. Thank you, Dominique. And so the department will be able to provide some continued national experts to be able to answer questions that I may not be able to answer, or even some questions that the department can use some help on. And then also, if you all feel so compelled, in addition to talking to people in your communities, if there are some social media outlets, personal or some of your organizations that you could really, push for public feedback using that feedback form that the department has on their website. I think that will be super helpful, not only to the department, but to us as well. Like I said earlier, with the town halls, you were having a lot of people in those particular regions commenting on the website, having high traffic volume there. But some of those same opinions may not have been reflected because commentary was not coming in. So the commissioner wanted to make sure that we were actively engaging there. So would appreciate any support that that you all have there. Is there anything else that any of you would like to discuss as far as new formula? Looking ahead, we'll meet 3 times next month, and with our final meeting being on January 26th. But before we, before I give you some time back, is there anything else with the good of the order that anyone would like to discuss, cover?
Thank you for your leadership. We appreciate all the hard work that's gone into pulling all this stuff together. It's not an easy task to herd all these cats, so we appreciate you all.
I would like to remind you all that you do have access to the public comment that has been received so far, so you want to spend some time with that between now and that January meeting. I think that Victor mentioned that at the beginning of the call. Just wanted to do a reminder, because that is some, if there's some pieces of that you might want to start categorizing as well.
Yeah, and thank you for that, Mary. And y'all make it easy for me, so I appreciate all of you. Dedicating your time to this very important topic for our children. And so our next meeting will be January 5th. I won't see all of you via Microsoft Teams for a while, but
Merry Christmas.
Happy to chat offline anytime you'd like. So if there's no further business, we are adjourned. Thank you all. Have a great day.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Thanks, Victor.